Welcome to Rooted, Stories of Entrepreneurship and Agribusiness, a podcast from Colorado State University's Department of Agricultural and Resource Economics. I'm your host, Lauren Chenerides. I'm currently an assistant professor of agricultural business at Colorado State University, where I teach a course on agribusiness entrepreneurship. In this podcast series, we explore stories of how people across the food and agriculture industry identify problems, create solutions, and build or improve businesses that make an impact. What makes Rooted unique is that each episode is co-hosted by students in the agribusiness entrepreneurship course who bring their own curiosity and questions to the table. Their conversations with leaders across food and agriculture are a chance to learn, reflect, and share those insights with you, our audience of students, entrepreneurs, and change makers in food and agriculture. I appreciate your time and attention, and I'm excited to share these inspiring stories with you. I'm joined today by our student co-hosts, Tad and Dino, who are both agricultural business majors, and our guest today is Brandon Hernandez. Brandon is a senior partner at Whole Brain Consulting, where he leads teams that provide technical and strategic support across the food and beverage industry. He has served as chairman of the board at Naturally Boulder, board advisor to the USDA Regional Economic Development Council, and contributes to initiatives at CU Boulder, the Naturally Network, the Pueblo Food Project, and the California Dairy Board Accelerator. Brandon has spent over 15 years helping food and beverage companies from early stage startups to global brands solve problems in food safety, supply chain management, and operations. Based in Denver, he holds multiple food safety certifications and is widely respected for his work in quality systems, team building, and good manufacturing practices compliance. Amazing, Brandon. Wow, what a record. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time to be here.
Welcome.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Brandon. Tell us about your history of how you got involved in the food and beverage industry. What appealed to you about that specific industry?
So my getting into the food industry was a complete accident, which was I was finishing my degree in biology from here, CSU, was thinking about pre-med, shadowed a number of doctors that convinced me otherwise. I won't get into their stories as to why, but they convinced me that it might not be the career path for me. If nothing else, it just didn't seem fulfilling. So my stepmom actually worked for a bean production facility in Greeley, which at the time produced a third of all the Taco Bell beans consumed in the U.S. I happened to start there just as a office assistant, as a secretary, which is where I got into logistics and production scheduling, and I do light APAR for her because that's what her job was. She was a controller, but it had a raw bean side and it had a finished cooked side. So I got to see the mechanics of, getting field run and the contracting that goes with field run and dealing with farmers. And then the other side, manufacturing and producing for Yum Brands, a huge company, still to this day, obviously. So it kind of gave me a taste for what the business would be. And then there was a opening in the QA lab at the facility that just happened to fit well within the schedule that I needed because I was still finishing school, and I had a wife and a kid at home, so it was like, well, I need to finish this. So anyways, did that and went into the lab and kind of took off in production, and it's been that way ever since.
And biology and then lab work seems like it's pretty compatible too.
Well,
did you feel like there was some similarities?
Yeah, I mean, the part that attracted me to it was the ability to, I'd gotten a science degree. I wanted to use it in some way. So I'd been looking at labs and all that. And when I went down to the production floor, the QA side, there was micro swabbing, there was chemistry that we had to do for salt analysis and moisture analysis and microbiological swabbing that we had to do. So I at least felt like I was using my degree. And in all honesty, I think that degree has served me more than I ever would have thought given what I do, because it's science is about, deconstructing a problem and like how to solve for the problem. So critical thinking skills that go with that and sort of what you need to think about. And so as a food safety career or even food production in general, as you're building large scale lines, it helped inform like, okay, what are the pitfalls in this? What do I need to be looking for? Like, or if I have a microbiological outbreak, like, vectoring, and what do I do for, chasing down microbiological outbreaks in a production facility. So I think from that standpoint, it was kind of fortuitous to be a biology degree, but it's even more lucky that I actually get to utilize that degree. Because there's a lot of people I know that I graduated with that were either political science or history or, and they're not using their degrees for anything related to those things. It's just they still do well, so don't get me wrong. College degree is still important, I think, but
that's what we still try to say that.
College degrees are
college degrees are still important.
But it's certainly my ability to turn that science degree into something that I can still use to this day is something I enjoy. So
and the food safety aspect too, I think must be one of the most important things that food companies are concerned about, at least from like a prevention side.
It'll be shocking for everyone to learn that up until FSMA acronym, the Food Safety Modernization Act, people would be generally surprised how Wild West it was. Or can be in the food, especially because in FDA land, FDA controls 80% of the food product. USDA is only 20%. You would be surprised some of the things some of the facilities I've walked into, even here in the U.S., that you walk in and you're like, how in the hell does anybody walk in here and allow you to run? How is this possible? Like that you're allowed to continue to do this and operate this way? I've found Norway rats, I've found cats, I've found raccoons in facilities, and I'll be like, how in the hell do you get away with this? And they're like, and I'll ask the owner, like, well, the FDA was just here a month ago, and it's like, wow, with their eyes closed. Up until FSMA, it was more Wild Westing it. Now they try and put some form and structure, supplements or cosmetics now. Cosmetics have the new updated requirements. Again, I've been into some supplements or like some makeup manufacturers. I got sent to a makeup manufacturer in 2018. And I remember walking through the place. I was like, people are going to put this on their face. Like, what are you doing? Like, this is a rotting facility with like mold and water everywhere. And, you're making things that people are going to put on their face and all that. And it's like, nah, all right. Like, so you go out and try and make it as good as you can. But anyways, the FSMA is helping to kind of steer that. We're nowhere near what the EU is, or like, the CFIA in Canada, things like that. But we're getting better, but it's like anything else. There's a lot of bad actors out there that fight to not have to meet those requirements. And it's always interesting to see.
Yeah. What do you think drives that? Why are there...
It's all money driven. Every dollar I spend on the floor, my cost per square foot to operate this facility can't go up, 10 points because I need to do micro swabbing now. So there's a lot of resistance to that. And realistically, food manufacturers in general, they may operate, when you're negotiating a deal with them, they may operate on a 20, 30 gross margin. But when you back out all of their other required costs to operate the business, their net margin, if they're a good running facility, their net margin may be, 2-3% a year.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, they are on a razor thin because you have the retailers that make it, because of COVID, they make it much harder to pass through price increases now. You have to justify the price increase to them, even though and I'll say they as like the retailer, I won't throw anybody under the bus, but in specifics, but they'll say, well, they'll take their own increase because they can do it. And, the brand goes to take an increase because they need to make more margin. And then, all of a sudden the retailer's like, well, we can't raise prices on people. And it's like, that is total
nonsense.
BS. So, there's a lot of different things that drive inflation in food manufacturing, especially, or cost issues in food manufacturing. So it makes it interesting to watch.
I was reading an article, say a week ago, and it was addressing how sometimes the FDA only does a inspection maybe once every 5 years, 5 to 10 years, which I found like ridiculous.
So they're legally required because of FSMA every 2 years. But when they got FSMA passed, they didn't fund it. So
it means
Who's going to inspect it? Who's going to serve as inspectors?
they were 35,000 auditors short before the current administration. And then the current administration started slashing the FDA budget for a lot of other stuff and actually fired inspectors and auditors. It's like, well, they can't meet the legal requirements. So what they do now is they'll do a risk assessment and basically say, okay, what is the level of risk associated with what's being produced in the facility? And they basically triage it at that point. So the most high risk, they'll come see every couple years.
So what would that be? Would that be meat and dairy, I assume, as far as high risk?
Well, no, meat and dairy is USDA, so they'll be
that's-
reviewed by
that's
inspectors
right.
all the time. Well,
We're
you're talking
FDA, so that would be
aseptic hot fills, still retorts, things that are a scheduled process, so things that have to have a scientific review for you to even operate the facility. Then you drop to the next tier, which is, say bakeries or something with a fryer, generally not going, or even energy bar manufacturers. Those are all pretty low risk because the interventions are, I can't produce bread without hitting a certain temperature profile. Mm-hmm. So what if the FDA is like, well, if they can still produce a loaf of bread, then it must be fine. And tortilla chips, potato chips, the same way. Yeah. Like I can't get a decent chip without it going through a 380 degree fryer.
Yeah.
So their risk profile is a lot lower.
We were talking about this earlier this week of at what point does a food business have to comply with, say, FSMA, or is it the cottage food companies or businesses that are making less than like $10,000 a year? Do they have to adhere to these food safety requirements, or at what point does that change?
So the rule of thumb is generally if you're over $1 million a year. So the FDA offers exemptions. If you're less than $1 million a year, the FDA will offer an exemption. They cut you out of certain parts of FSMA or certain parts of the legal requirement for labeling or something like that. So or specified labeling. So they may cut certain aspects of it out for you. But once you get over $1 million, so cottage food will cover you from 0 to say roughly $1 million, and then anything above and beyond $1 million, you'll encounter some the higher tier of regulatory requirement. Now, you say all that to also go back to, let's say I'm $500,000 a year, but I've made it into retail, a Kroger, a Walmart, a Target, whatever. Oftentimes, because FDA land, that 80% is often a self-policing. A lot of the retailers will come back and a Walmart will say, well, you have to meet these requirements whether you want to or not. GMP, the good manufacturing practices, they may come back to you and go, depending on the risk profile, you have to have this. So like Walmart has a supplier guide, and the supplier guide actually breaks down, okay, if you're in these categories, you're high risk. It doesn't matter how much money you generate with us. You have to meet these food safety requirements. If you're in these categories, we have a less restrictive program and you can sell through based on this, but it really depends on the category of food product you're in.
So speaking of good manufacturing practices and good agricultural practices, what does that mean for you, your company, and just the companies you work with in general?
So generally, the hard part is especially GMP or GAP, so good agricultural practices or good manufacturing practices. Generally speaking, those are developed by third parties that take the laws that are written and then try to apply that to an audit to say, okay, when I walk into this field or I walk into this manufacturing facility, how am I sure that you met legal requirement to operate this facility the way that it is, or this field or whatever. From that perspective, those are oftentimes generated by third parties that you pay to come in and audit your facility to say, have you met the requirement or haven't you? So again, going back to the Walmart supplier guide, they may say, we require third-party GMP, or we require third-party global GAP, and you can meet it through these different auditing bodies, Primus or NSF or Silicor. You can meet it through these different companies, but you have to meet the requirement. If you can't pass this audit, you can't provide product to us. But again, the third-party audit system is replete with not so great
So,
actors.
so it can be skewed.
Oh, 110% it can be.
Interesting. See, like Mr. Hernandez was talking, we were discussing this in class earlier, but we didn't go really in depth with it. But that's a really interesting note, is that they can be skewed.
I mean, I'm sure when you're dealing with any third party, there's a lot of bias in dealing with them.
Well, so the number one roundtable in any food safety, there's international food safety summits and stuff like that. The number one table that is always full every time is auditor calibration. And so auditor calibration, not even FDA or USDA inspectors, but third party auditors, that the roundtable is, you showed up last year and you said all this was fine. Mm-hmm. You showed up this year and you didn't like any of it. But it was your interpretation of the audit, not the actual audit itself. I can't amend what I'm doing based on your attitude that day. You get out of the bed, you got the wrong side of bed one day, and you come to read me the riot act. How's that fair to me? Yeah. I complied with what the code said. But auditor calibration is often tough, especially when it comes from like year to year, because you have to get them every year, and you can't always guarantee that you get the same person. That's becomes part of, I'll call it the game of what it is that is the revenue generated through audits and all that is, that's part of the game, is just dealing with their different attitudes and backgrounds.
Yeah. This sounds very similar to, say, like the organic seal of these companies that go through the trouble of getting the organic brand, I should say, on their fields. What's it, every 3 years, I think it is?
They have to lay their before they turn
it's
from
a 3-year
conventional to organic.
Yeah,
they have to lay their land fallow, essentially.
But it sounds pretty kind of similar to where it's like they need to be audited and stuff for the organic badge, but it's kind of can be skewed in the same sorts, because I know where I'm from in the Salinas Valley, there's a lot of organic, but is it really organic? Neighbor might spray a little bit on your side on purpose.
So I know plenty of organic places that I've been, and I won't say who, but there have been plenty of organic places I've been that I'm like, that's not true.
Yeah.
Like you fudged your records, or you did like
exactly.
You can literally, like, your yield that came out of this field is not conducive to an organic style product. Again, the organic auditor, like any audit, right? I can only audit, or the things I audit, the data is only as good as what you feed me.
True.
So
you can hide a lot.
You can hide a lot of stuff in the mystery, and I've seen plenty of that.
On this whole idea of auditing, how does that work in an international market? So if you're working with companies that want to sell to the EU or want to sell to Canada, or we're talking. Let's not necessarily talk about, or maybe we could say, the big national brands or the big global brands. They obviously have like processes in place, but what about some of those mid-scale or lower tier companies that want to start to export their products? How does that auditing process work?
So to export, we have a lot of, I'll call it like reciprocity across the globe. So especially with like the USDA, depending on what you're talking about, chicken or cattle, or we have a lot of international reciprocity deals that are done that say, okay, if you're in this type of facility, you are equal to what we would require, so you can ship out to. So a lot of people don't know that we broker, the U.S. as a country brokers a ton of cattle from Australia through us into the EU, into different markets, and it's all based on the reciprocity agreement that did you meet the ear tag requirements or the hormone schedules or antibiotic schedules, things like that. But when it comes to FDA, there's countries in this world where, I'm not picking on Dubai, but I've done it before, which is, I was producing popcorn, and all I had to do was produce a certificate of free sale. Basically, all the certificate of free sale says that I'm an FDA registered facility, or I'm a federally reviewed facility in the country where I'm producing, and that was enough for the EU government. I shipped container loads of popcorn, and all I had was this one piece of paper that said, no, the FDA knows I exist and that I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, great. Ship whatever you want.
And is that something that the company produces, or that they have to like download a specific form and get it notarized, or how formal is that process?
When I did it, it's not terribly difficult. You print it, you fill it out. No notarization was required. It was just, give me your registration number, give me that. Now, not every country in the world does that. There are some, like when you're in the EU, then you have to show like, okay, how did I meet compliance to EU standards? Mm-hmm. Does this product fit the profile for what we allow in the EU? So they're a little more sticky about what they'll allow and what they won't. But there are other countries that are like, does the FDA know you exist? Great. send whatever you want.
I find that really interesting because from what I've seen, the EU just thinks of the FDA as like a joke. As far as like I was reading about bread, they say a lot of American bread has been fortified with a lot of things, and EU just says no. We don't even see this as bread. A lot of cases they'll see it as cake or something. I was reading about like a Subway loaf or something. It was seen as cake, and so I'm just curious how the EU could see some of the things done by the FDA is okay, perfect, and some of the things as we don't want that at all.
A lot of it has to come down to the genetics and the genetic mutations that we put into our own food that we allow.
Yeah.
Hopefully Monsanto doesn't have me struck down, but you've got like our wheat. Yeah. Our wheat here is generally, because of all the genetic manipulation we've allowed, is not what the EU would consider. Ours grows to 6 feet, 8 feet, theirs grows to 3, right? Like, so they know that manipulation has happened. And I know plenty of people that have gone to the EU and they're like, I can't eat bread in the U.S., otherwise I swell up or I have issues, I have digestive problems. They go to the EU and they get Italian zero flour or whatever their equivalent is, and and all of a sudden they're like, I could eat bread again. I didn't feel like garbage. I didn't swell up. Like, there is very specific reasons for it. And the EU, I mean, realistically, when you go into an EU production facility, it can be worlds away different than what you may see here.
In a good way or bad way, or just different?
I think I mean it in a good way. I mean, it's definitely presents a lot cleaner than some of the places that I go here.
Interesting.
Like here, you can walk into anywhere and people are in their street clothes. Some places they don't even give them lab coats. They're literally in their street clothes with just gloves on. Looks like an oversized.
At least there's gloves.
Kitchen.
At least there's gloves.
Yeah.
Could always be
But
worse.
the gloves were not a requirement up until 10 years ago.
That's amazing.
So you could, as long as I wash my hands, I could sit there and I could do whatever I wanted in the.
We were just watching a video on Haribo's manufacturing facility in Wisconsin, and thankfully they were handling the gummies with gloves on, and they were tight. So just those sorts of things. I mean, how much does the average consumer know about what's happening in the production facilities? Say somebody is intrigued by this part of the food supply chain, the inspection, auditing, food safety handling. What should they do to get involved? Like, did you need certifications? Did you have to go to special workshops or classes? Like, what would be the journey for this person who's interested in this, like, part of the supply chain?
So if you were going to go, say you wanted to be an FDA or USDA inspector, just you wanted to go like the government route, oftentimes you can enter that and then they'll put you through their training protocol. They have, facilities and like the FDA training grounds in Florida, or the USDA will basically do whatever local office, right? So you'll go through a training program, like how they expect your inspections to go or what you need to be looking for. Third-party auditing through, again, the FDA side where it's Silica and NSF and all that, you can go straight away and get jobs there, and they'll put you through training through like specific, internal auditing training and stuff like that. I would say that generally speaking, you will get the hardest time from somebody like me if one of these young men showed up and then they started reading me the riot act about what I'm doing. The first thing I'd be like, hang on, this is my facility, number one. Number two, I know the microbiologicals. I know what the issues are. Is it because you don't have any gray hair yet that, you haven't been through enough facilities to see what's going on? Because I can tell you right now I'm food safe and I have the testing to prove it. Generally speaking, you could get into that, and I know the third-party audit system's looking for. I always say if you're going to try that, I would always say go to like Costco or go to Walmart, because they have internal QA teams that they expend a lot of time, effort, and energy to not only put you in good training situations, but then secondarily like, hey, sometimes this is life. And so, let's take a step back before we roll too hard on what they're doing at the facility. I would always say go private first, and then you can go into like the NSFs and the Silicers and all that, because it can be, if you haven't seen it before, go get the experience. Because again, if you come to somebody like me, I know the rules of the game. So my first thing to them, if I get too hard a time, is like, hang on, I'm paying you, number one. Number two, this is supposed to be a learning experience for us both. And if I have to teach you more, then that's what I'm going to do, because you might, as the auditor, you might have the right to extend the audit as much as you want. I have the right to call your boss, and I have a right to understand what we're doing. And I'll be the first one that does that. That's why I get paid what I paid and I get to do what I do, because I've been in a couple audits where I'm like, stop, like, get your boss on the phone. I want to know what's going on. Are we doing your interpretation of what's happening here, or are we doing the actual audit? Because I'm not sure what we're doing now. And so that's part of, and I nobody believes me, because there's a handful of people that have seen it. I've done it to FDA inspectors, USDA inspectors. I've done it to third-party auditors. I don't care. It's like, stop. I'm not here for your bad day, or maybe you got in a fight with your wife last night. Great, wonderful. Go take it out somewhere else, not here.
Yeah. And I think too, like, because it is somewhat voluntary on behalf of the food manufacturer, it's that, you're trying to do it for getting in a supplier's list for these retail companies, or maybe these other companies are doing that so they can get on Walmart's approved list. So the fact that there's this mutual reciprocity in that process is pretty important.
Yeah. And it certainly can be. Just remember that too many people, the first thing I teach any food safety person, especially that when I go into a facility that's failed, say like that year or a couple months before or whatever, the first thing I'll do is like, let me observe the next audit. And so then I'll sit and I'll observe. And I was like, why do you keep rolling over and playing dead? They literally were wrong, and you allowed them to act this way. So you get what you tolerate. So quit tolerating it. Like, you can't take this and then when we go off to dinner that night, you cry at dinner because you got rolled for 10 points that day. It's like, you could have fought them, you just chose not to.
And what happens if they fail?
So depending on the nature of the failure, the bigger 3-day audits that are GFSI, so Global Food Safety Initiative, those are 2 3-day audits of facilities. You can get put in probation, which means that, in 6 months they're going to come back and review you, and then they'll be back 6 months after that. So it's kind of probation. If you outright fail, depending on who you're dealing with, they will either allow you to fix everything and have it again in 30 days, but they'll have some time horizon that says, okay, we'll re-audit in 60 days. So you have 60 days to get your collective stuff together, and then we'll come back and audit. If you get it done sooner, great. If not, then we'll be back at day 60. So generally there is a mechanic to get back like in the good graces relatively quickly. It just depends on the nature of the failure.
And in that period of waiting, nothing happens?
Oh no, like most people, if there's again, depending on the nature of the failure, there's either a huge CapEx assignment for whether it's floor repair, building repair, infrastructure issues, or it could be your paperwork was woefully deficient. So you call somebody like me and we go in and we fix all the paperwork and make it amendable to whatever it is that they're doing. It just depends on the nature of the failure.
So going more into whole brain, you guys focus on so many different sectors in agriculture, from like supply chain, product development, food safety. So how do you decide when to add more sectors to whole brain to do more in consulting?
So generally speaking, like everything else I've done in life, even starting whole brain, it was more a function of random observation. So what I mean by that is like, there's a need here and I just happened to stumble into it. I'll tell anybody that most of my journey is probably attributable to luck, right? Like I didn't do, like I wasn't, I wasn't sitting there like some genius, like, oh, if I did this, I'm going to add this much line items to my P&L. It never worked like that. It would literally be, I'd be walking somewhere and I was like, if you did this way, this would actually be more efficient. And then I'd quickly do the math, like, yeah, you could get 30% more out of that line if you did this way. I did that 3 times. Now all of a sudden we have a CI team, a continuous improvement team. Because they were like, hey, could you come and do this at the rest of the facility? Or I have 4 facilities. Could you go walk through? It's like, sure. The food safety one was the only one I went out with intention. And that was, I was coaxed into going into food safety consulting by a then friend, my first business partner. But beyond that, it's all been,
You just see a need and then you're like, oh, I think I could figure out something to do with it.
Well, no, that assumes that I saw it. Like, that assumes I knew I was looking at. Like, I'd be like, no, if you did this way, or in your supply chain, if you hooked up with this distributor, and then you went over here, you'd actually save a bunch of margin points, or, you're going to save on shipping costs or whatever. It was just random knowing what I knew from my first job and then observing.
Yeah.
And it's like, it was supply chain.
Is it because you could experience what they were experiencing, almost like put yourself in the shoes of those people, saying, that allowed you to be observant because you understood what they were going through?
I have two qualities that have served me well. One being just generally observant, which I think comes from the science background stuff. Like observing a system, you change the system, right? Like that's just part of it. Second is that I am a pain in the ass when it comes to that. I can be opinionated about just about anything. Like you ask me, I'll be as politically correct about it as possible. But there'll be times that I'm like, that's BS and here's why. Like, and then I'll say like, you've been doing it. We walked into a juicing facility. I won't say who because everybody would know, but $250 million a year. And we walk in and we look at their supply chain sheet, like what they're paying and all that. I'm like, I had looked at the market the day before, and I'm like, you're like 30% over. Like, why are you paying this much for this material? Especially because you're a $250 million facility. These prices should be going down for the volume you're pulling, not going up or staying where they're at. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, we had pulled their sheet, pulled an RFQ, a request for quote. What really got me in trouble was we did it to the same supplier they were already using. And we had white labeled it saying, well, we can't say who it is. But one of the sales guys looked at the numbers and he had already given the pricing and it was 45% cheaper than what they were paying. And the guy calls me all pissed off, like, hey, like, you didn't tell me this was for so-and-so. I was like, it's not my job to tell you. I was like, if you were really a good person, you would have given them this discount because of the volume they're pulling. Right. Now I found it, and now you're going to give it to them. And so we'd saved them over $10 million the first year in raw material costs because they were sitting there just because internally the supply chain person hadn't looked at contracting or their numbers in 10 years. It's like you got 6 people in your supply chain. Like, why didn't anybody look at this?
I feel like you deal with ethics a lot in your line of work. I mean, you see the bad, you see the bad, the good, bad, the ugly. How do you deal with, situations like that where something's wrong? Well, maybe this is a little too personal, not personal, but like, I don't want you to throw anyone under the bus, but like, how do you deal with when something's wrong, but you just can't quite, you don't know what to do about it?
I will say this, that it's served me well. It's probably gotten me respect that I wasn't anticipating. And this is not me tooting my own horn because I hate that. I'll go back to that previous example. The sales guy knew it was me. Yeah. And so he called me direct. He called my direct. There's so many people that have my cell phone number that, he calls me out of the blue and starts reading me the riot act. My literal answer to him was, well, you should have passed through. Well, and he was like, well, you know me. I thought we were friends. And I was like, I'm not here to be loved. Like, they're not paying me to be loved. Like, I got friends. Anytime I get into an argument with an auditor and they really want to go at me, I'm like, listen, I got drinking buddies. I don't need you to have a beer with me. I don't want you to go fishing with me. I don't care. I'm here to get the job done. So either you do your job right or I'll make you do your job right. And I don't care if you like me after this. When you get into business, and especially the food business, everybody wants to be loved and everybody wants to be liked. And, you walk into the room and it's like, listen, if you do your job right, eventually, even those people that get mad at you, they will come around to the fact that you were right and that they should have done it. And there's very few places that I go where somebody that was mad at me is still mad at me. They'll come to me and be like, yeah, I probably should have.
Yeah.
People respect boundaries. They maybe not in the moment, but they come back to it.
Yeah, they'll eventually get there.
So do you have any advice for, students or entrepreneurs that are wanting to start a business, know that maybe their road is a little skewed, say financially or something? How do you stay on a straight line to where to stay honest, to be true to yourself? Because it sounds like when you started your business, you were always, standing up tall, true to yourself. And, how do you correlate that with, entrepreneurs?
I tell anybody, whether it's, doing the Naturally Network stuff or students elsewhere that I'll talk to, nobody gets out of small business unscarred. When I started in the food business, 15, 16 years ago, I was 6'2" with blonde hair. I was beautiful. And now look at me. Like, you don't get through what you've got. Don't go through it expecting not to be scarred by it. Yeah. If it means something to you, then do it. And don't half-ass it. Don't be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like, if you need to carry a job of 9 to 5 for the first year, that helps kind of facilitate what it is you're doing. But once you get to an inflection point, there'll be a point where you can't spread yourself far enough, and you have to make that decision. And the decision is always scary. Should I do this? Should I not? Because one is everybody, the safety net of a W-2. Like, I don't have to worry about P&Ls. I mean, I do to a point, but I don't have to worry about the P&Ls. I don't worry about business performance. I don't have to, because my check is essentially covered. Yeah. I know I don't have to worry about it. Whereas when you get into your own business, it's down to, what's the expense of the pencil I buy today? Should I be buying that? Anybody that gets into entrepreneurship or wants to have their own business, be prepared to fight. And I don't mean like fight everybody. I mean like be prepared to push yourself, because there's going to be seasons that you go through where you're like, I can't get over this hump. I don't want to do this anymore. And you have to decide, is it worth it?
How do you get out of those seasons? Like when someone's in that low valley, where do you go?
Those are the times that will define you more than everybody. Everybody can wander around and, bask in the glow of success. It's the valleys that you get into where it's like, how do I get out of this? And everybody's peaks and valleys are different. Is it a cost pressure issue? Am I charging too much? Am I not charging enough? Is the business not performing? Is my EBITDA not high? Like, pre-2018, most PE firms didn't care about an EBITDA positive business. They cared that you had higher sales numbers. So they didn't care if the business actually made money every year. They cared that you had a $30, $40, $50 million a year brand, and then they'd value your exit at that. Now, because of COVID and everything else, and because of what COVID did to supply chain and cost pressures and all that, the first thing that a lot of PE firms did during lockdown was, you have to start running an EBITDA positive business, because we're not going to give you any more money anymore.
EBITDA.
Oh God. So basically that is what the business made after all the expenses and everything are driven out of it. It's not net margin, but net margin is a portion of it, which is EBITDA is just how well did the business perform. And it used to be, you can have a $50 million business that has a negative EBITDA. Basically that it doesn't make any money every year. It just loses money. So it is possible to do that. But EBITDA negative businesses are constantly out then generating basically cash flow from private equity firms. And I just piece myself off as I go along. So it just depends. Now, cash is a lot harder to get than it used to be. And so, now they're like, no, you have to have a fiscally responsible business. And when you start taking private equity, they'll talk to you all day long about your fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders and all this other garbage. And it's like, you gave me the money. Like, I don't know what to tell you. If it goes or it goes down, like I can only control so much of my fate. So it just depends on, but the nature of it changes. So again, going back to the original question of how do you get out of the valley? It just depends on how you got into the valley, what drove you into it. If it's personal, right? If it's a personal outside, a wife, a kid, whatever, husband, and they're the ones pushing you into the valley, that's different than getting out of, I have a business mechanic issue. So it just depends.
So speaking on valleys, like a valley like COVID-19 or like the 2008 recession, like how do you get out of a valley like that that's just purely situational?
The one thing that I advised a lot of brands that first month of lockdown was like, don't panic. I go, because panicking is the worst. Making panic decisions is the worst thing that you can do. Take it, sleep on it, take a day, whatever it takes. But especially when it came to COVID, the pressure during COVID was more, if you produced it, somebody was going to buy it. That became the issue in COVID for food brands was that it didn't matter what I charged for it. If I put it on the shelf, somebody was going to buy it because you had an entire populace that was panic buying. I just need anything. So I'll buy because I want my kids to eat, or I want to be able to have a variety in my pantry. So if I charge $10 for a bag of chips, somebody was going to buy it. And so you had a different issue, which is a concept that we're running into. We continue to run into it. And it's not an actual technical term. It's stickyflation, which is that if I take, and I sell this for $10 a bag, but all of a sudden my ingredient costs drop, my cost to manufacture drops. From a moral standpoint, if I'm running an EBITDA positive business, how much is enough? And so stickyflation being, well, I got Kroger to approve my 30% increase, but now my costs just dropped 60%. Do I give that margin back to the people that are buying it, or do I put it in my own pocket?
Yeah, it seems like we haven't recovered from that yet.
And that's the problem that you have now, is that oftentimes most food brands are not giving that back. Retailers aren't giving it back. Food brands aren't giving it back. That's why this whole tariff conundrum that we're in is like, there are a lot of different reasons why it's good or it's bad, but the main premise being that, well, if I set my cost card on these tariff numbers and those tariffs go away, which is a real possibility, do I keep that money or should I give that back to the people that are buying it?
I think most people would keep it. Just as we were stating about ethics and stuff, I think in our world today, a lot of people are financially driven, because there's a lot of unknowns in today's world. And I feel like a lot of people would choose, no, we're going to keep it and just keep prices going up. I don't see prices going down anytime soon.
Yeah, and the research is mixed too. Yeah. We're looking at, retailers, do they drop their margins after their costs go down? And it's interesting how quickly they raise it to pass, to a point, because you also said too, retailers like to keep their prices at a constant because they have loyal customers. The worst thing that can happen is losing their customers. They're going to squeeze their manufacturers. But then when the reverse happens, how quickly are they going to drop those prices? They don't see it happen as fast.
Well, the other issue you have is that a lot of those are publicly traded companies. That's right. And now they have a fiduciary responsibility to Wall Street to keep their stock prices going up. Well, how do I do that? I generate more revenue.
How do you generate more revenue?
Yeah,
the price is higher. Get more people in.
Set an entire supply chain up against and pit us against each other.
Easiest way to make the stockholders happy.
Well, if you look at statistics for, say eggs in general, you see sharp spikes going up, but you never see sharp spikes going down. It's always up, maybe a little bit back down, up, a little bit back down. I don't know how much time we have left, but passion and restlessness are kind of what I was getting when you were talking about, getting into entrepreneurship and just having that relentless effort to strive to make your business work. Is that how you would sum kind of having those two specific qualities, or would you spin it a different way?
I've learned a lot in the last couple of years when we talked about this. So I will give the one tidbit away that I recently got divorced, and I think that being driven or driving myself as hard as I did was probably a contributing factor to that. And so I always coach in my business now and with any young entrepreneur, find your work-life balance, because at the end of the day, I don't get to take any of this stuff with me. And the costs, oftentimes, you have to pit the personal cost versus the business, versus the positive outcome in the business. If I sacrifice time with my kids, was it worth it? If I sacrifice, when I first started, when I was on my own the first 3 years, I'd do 40 to 60 hours on site. Then I'd go home and I'd invoice all day Saturday. Then I'd go to networking events at night. Like, there were probably 2 solid years that I was constantly doing something related to the business. And, to this day, now that I'm building a second company called Tag, which is an international company, I just got back from Germany and I'm going to go to UAE and now when I talk to like my business partner about who's doing what, I sit there and I try and temper, okay, I'll go this 1 week, but then I'm going to take 2 weeks and I'm going to be home with my family or my kids, because at the end of the day, regardless of however big whole brain gets, or however big I can get tag, I have come to the conclusion I've sacrificed enough. I have a comfortable life. I've sacrificed enough. I don't mind building the second thing, but I have to learn from my mistakes in the past. And so I have to go revisit like how I did it. Because ultimately I know how I am from the perspective of once I get something in my mind that I'm going to do this thing, I will do it. I'm going to do it. And I had to learn to, throttle myself back. Like, hey, there's a certain level of expectation of yourself that you, like the list that you went through for the boards and this stuff and all that. This is fun. I like doing this. And so, but the board stuff and all that, everybody's like, how do you do this all day? Or, you have all these things that you do. And it's like, you're talking about each one of those is an hour a month. Yeah. Like, we're not talking a huge lift. So it seems impressive, but realistically, it's not a huge ask to contribute to those causes.
I find this really fascinating. Hearing this from a successful business owner, a lot of the business Harvard business reviews that we do and the podcast or the
case studies.
The case studies. I'm blanking. Excuse me. We see these these entrepreneurs, these people that have this vision, this passion, just jump, just take that leap and just head straight forward, full throttle. And I feel like a lot of the times, doing what you just said is taking a step back, thinking, kind of calculating your risks, thinking what do I want from out of this, and just taking that extra time makes all the difference. And it kind of sounds like
first thing I talk to young entrepreneurs about, or even when I was like running a facility and I was training people, the first thing that I would add, if you came to me with we need to do this way. Okay. The first thing I would say is, or else what? There's an or else in every argument. And even when you're building your own company, I have to do X. You have to ask yourself, or else what? What's the or else? There's always an or else in the argument. If I do X, what happens to Y? And the problem that entrepreneurs have is, one, they don't trust their own instincts enough. But then secondarily, they're so busy trying to look at the whole picture that they don't take a second to actually look at the whole picture. They get lost in, well, this is the business picture and I have the personal one over here. And it's like, no, those are one and the same. And you have to put those together and you have to say, well, if I do this, what is it going to cost me over here? But that's the or else in the argument. What does it cost me over here? You don't spend enough time doing that. Oftentimes I would frustrate many people I was training. Like, don't come to me with a one-way argument, because I'm going to ask you what the or else is. And if you don't know, I'm going to tell you to walk right back out the door that you came in until you can come up with it. Because it's not my job to think of all the solutions. Like, if you have a problem, what Teddy Roosevelt, complaining about a problem without offering a solution is called whining. So go back out the door until you have a solution for me. Those are I will help contribute to it, but you didn't ask me to do that. You came and you gave me an ultimatum. Go back and come back when you have an answer. That's what I want to know.
And I think, Brandon, having someone in my life like you to remind me that, hey, there is an or else, I think even just as someone who's proximally an entrepreneur, I think is good advice. I will even take that. I'm not a student, but I'm still a student. I'm always a student. Everyone's always a student. We have time for maybe one more question, so I'll turn it over to you guys and see if you have any final questions you want to ask Brandon before we turn it in for the day.
The one final question is, so you attribute a lot of what you do to luck, obviously, but so you started your consulting career with 100 business cards in your pocket and went to a conference in New York. You kind of brought in the mindset, I'm going to make this work no matter what. Is that kind of a mindset you've brought throughout your whole company, throughout your whole career?
So is when I first started, I had got a business deal go bad. And it was actually, I had an opportunity, this was in late February, early March, to go to the largest trade show in the food industry, not the ag side, but the food world, food and beverage, which was Expo West, which is in Anaheim. I remember I was sitting at the dinner table trying to figure out what I was going to do, because I told the woman and her husband that I was working for to basically go fly a kite. I'll say it the nice way. That's not what I wrote in the email. But I was sitting there and I was like, I had a couple $1,000s worth of invoices out to them, and I'm like, I don't know if they're gonna pay them. Like, but I had a couple $100 to my name, and I was like, what can I do? And so at that point, it was like my wife at the time was like, you just need to go for it. You seem to enjoy it. Let's just make this go. So I borrowed $100 from my dad. At the time, you could get a $99 flight out to Anaheim and back, so I could leave at 6 a.m. and fly back at midnight for $99. I had 2 weeks to get ready. Built my website off of the original Wix platform. So I built my website in a day. I ordered 100 cards. I booked my ticket, flew out there. I knew a handful of people in the industry, and one of the guys that I knew, I don't want to get him in trouble, but he had basically taken one of his employees, because at the time, now they check your ID versus your badge to see, but at the time they didn't. So he got me a random guy's name, gave me the lanyard so I could go into the trade show for a day. And he's like, I just told my guy to take the day off and you could have it. Okay, great. Went through all 100 cards, weaseled my way into a party that night so I could eat. So I ate dinner at this random party. I can't remember. It was like a private equity party. Got in a cab, went back to LAX and flew back at midnight. And that was the first day of the show, which was at the time was a Thursday. I get back, sweat bullets for a couple of days, and then it was the middle of the following week that I picked up 12 people out of the show, because I had been introduced by enough people that knew. Because when you're in consulting, your referrals generally carry you. I mean, everybody will tell you, like, if you're a consultant and your referrals don't carry you, you're probably not a very good consultant. So, especially when you're a one-person band. And so I had 12 clients coming out of that, and I kept right on trucking from there. But it was, that seems like 99% luck and 1% good. Yeah. Like there was I was going to do it, and so I did it.
Determination too, to just know that you could trust yourself, and that when you showed up there, that you could get it done in the time frame that you were there. So awesome, Brandon. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you more. I think Dino, Tad, excellent questions, and I think all the students will be really thrilled to hear your experience. So
yeah, appreciate
so
it.
much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.